The game we're discussing today, Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk, has a hilarious name. It's also one of the worst depictions of mental illness ever. If you suffer from overthinking, listening to a video essayist without a college degree break down this psychological horror game, it might finally give you answers. Not your mom, not your therapist, remember if you get better, they're out of a job, and definitely not other video creators. They would rather read the game's script, verbatim.
Now she hears another strange sound. It's coming from above now. The ceiling moves upwards, squeaking. Small debris falls.
But, you know, the game's made by a really cool Russian dude who's channeled his real pain creatively into his writing. So while it isn't accurate, it comes from a real place. It's relatable, and that's what makes it great. Now, psychosis is a frequent mental health topic that is incorrectly associated with this game. Even Wikipedia references this in the previous installment's page, but there's no direct textual evidence that she's suffering from this. However, based on my research, people suffering from psychosis aren't cute anime girls with pale complexion and awesome hair. Trust me, if that were true, I'd be lining up at the local mental hospital. But seriously, media that glamorizes mental illness, even accidentally, misses the point. Editor, cue up the sad music. Daddy's got something to say. Victims of psychosis don't see what appears to be actors from Rick and Morty's multidimensional cable, nor do they view the world as this horrific visual novel. They're just like us, except reality lies to them, constantly, and without warning.
The reality that I had known was distant. Mainly in music, I don't know how to explain it, the song lyrics would change, and they would say hateful things, racist things, homophobic things.
When you're suffering from psychosis, its effects are internal, which means there's no evidence it's even happening besides your own words. Now, racist and homophobic remarks might fly in the boys' group chat, but when you're telling people that you're hearing voices in your music, for example, they likely won't believe your experience. Professionals are unsure how to label your affliction, and your parents will try their best to help, but they'll likely fail to confront something they can't even see. Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk nails two of these dynamics. The main character, an unnamed girl, suffers from mental illness in ways others can't see, and she views her own mother as a monster who injects venom into her veins. However, this depiction of her mother and the outside world is comically dark. The sky is red, there's a large circle in the sky, characters flicker between real people, and God's mistake. None of this is literal, and none of it should be. And credit to the dev, he admits this himself. Because Psychosis doesn't have cool visuals. People who label this title a game about psychosis are wrong.
It uses it to offer a glimpse into what psychosis might actually be like.
From what appears to be a severe trauma and psychosis.
She has psychosis.
It says many with a self-disorder eventually develop psychosis.
It's Saturday Night Live! Starring a piece of toast, a man painted silver who makes robot noises, Jarmanarnar,
Nikita Kroyakov, the game's creator, humbly admits in a Reddit comment that the game is simply an artistic interpretation of something that is real. And yeah, people who put genuine effort into understanding the game will understand it isn't really the best depiction, but anyone who's felt the game will know that there is truth and soul behind each of these abstract visual elements. The developer also mentions how there's virtually no need to dig deeper into the story, but if I followed that advice, I'd be out of a job, and I love money. Nothing in the world makes sense, and that's why I love this game. It's not a narrative about finding yourself. In fact, the moment you accept that the mind can't be defined is when you start to see its shape. That's the paradox. The game that doesn't make sense is the most profound. The one with the worst depiction of mental illness connects to us the most. The journey to define the undefinable teaches more than any answer ever could. I refuse to call this video game the best depiction of mental illness, because it isn't. And for those of you with strong stomachs and no will to live, once I blow your socks off after all this time we have together, you owe me 3 things. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, and donate to my coffee. I don't actually drink coffee, but I did just get Diamond Grandmaster on Marvel Rivals, and I'm playing purely Psylocke. I really want this new skin. One of the most relatable aspects of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk Outside a Bag of Milk is the girl's tendency to overthink. The girl is self-aware, she understands her feelings, and constantly reflects on moments in her life that have affected her. And she expresses this pain by yapping. It's really hard to follow her monologues, but despite it feeling like fucking nonsense, there are moments where she's quite profound. She's also creative. She reimagines her reality as a visual novel, people become monsters, stress manifests as shadows, and purchasing a bag of milk becomes a reason to hate herself. herself. In the game's introduction, she creates this self-deprecating story. The milk that she bought was taken from safety, the store, and delivered into danger, her home. And by subjecting this box of milk into this kidnapping, she concludes that she only brings trouble to others. It's cringe. Cue the edgy wolf meme. She's so misunderstood. But you and I are cringe too. We all think negatively about ourselves in a way where if anyone else heard it, they'd say, what the fuck are you talking about? Now this might sound like a contradiction. Do I think the girl is cringe or do I find her relatable? The answer is both, and that's why she's so fantastically written. For example, she's way too hard on herself. Like she stares at the mirror, blaming herself for things that aren't her fault. And that's just so me. But because her problems are so weird, like I don't know anyone who'd feel bad for carrying a bag of milk, it becomes way too bizarre to not find entertaining. Afterwards, the girl skips her medication and imagines a voice in her head. That voice is you, the player. But here's the thing. The voice is not induced by drugs or psychosis. Even though the creator claims that it's drugs on Twitter, let me pause here because this is like the focal point of my entire theory, and honestly, I don't think the developer knows the lore of his own game. At the start of Milk Outside, the girl refuses to take her medication. She's sober, even happy. She swallows imaginary pills and then conjures up a voice in her head to make small talk with. She does end up taking the real pills, and that's where it gets like really tricky, but before that, there is a window where the voice exists when there's no drugs in her system. Now, after she consumes the real medication, the voice remains unaffected by the pills, which means the voice being drug-induced is false. There's actually no correlation, no relationship between the drugs and the voice. However, in the first game, the girl is medicated, and when the effects wear off, the voice disappears. That matches the concept that the voice is drug-induced. This contradiction puts the canon in a really strange place. The voice is drug-induced in the first game. That part is clear, but it is clearly not in the second. Nikita has even said the first game was made as a joke, and that's exactly how it feels when you play it. Milk Inside is a great game, but it constantly breaks the fourth wall, I think a bit too much. The girl even removes the frames of the chat box at one point. Basically, it's very normal for the game to break the visual novel structure entirely. The second game doesn't do that as much. It tries to be a real story. There's no fourth wall break. She never manipulates the text boxes. She references visual novels, but she doesn't talk to you directly. She talks to the voice, and the voice and the visual novel perspective are all happening inside her mind. It's not a fourth wall break, it's more so internal. The sequel's depiction of mental illness is also more ambiguous. She only hints at her disease indirectly. In the first game, she directly states that she's suffering from something specific, but then doesn't tell you. It's so like, ugh. The girl then says that after an incident, she only sees red, and it's just difficult to take seriously. It reminds me of a film with a really bad depiction of mental illness. In 2001, a movie called A Beautiful Mind was released, depicting John Nash, an American mathematician who suffered from schizophrenia. Now, like Milk Outside's girl, Nash's character faces issues in how his mental illness is portrayed. Very quickly and simply, John Nash mainly experienced auditory hallucinations in his real life. He heard voices, he didn't see people. In the movie, though, an entire central character turns out to be a hallucination. Completely faked, and we don't know the entire film. And this is a huge exaggeration of what John Nash went through. Films like this do help raise awareness, but they end up misrepresenting how these mental conditions, like schizophrenia, actually work. Saying the girl only sees red after an incident when it just isn't fucking possible. It reads like her mental illness is psychological fan fiction. And while the artist within me accepts creative liberties, I honestly don't like it, especially when both games do a fantastic job at being relatable otherwise. I mean, would you, as a writer, make up a fictional physical disease? Like maybe in the sense of like, you know, the context of a viral zombie apocalypse or Benjamin Button, you know, you're old but you're young, that's quirky, right? But would you like make a dramatized version of lung cancer? I don't want to moralize Nikita's writing. Like at the end of the day, who gives a shit? This is all for fun. But we can reflect and learn why this style of writing misses the mark when you really think about it. So what's the point of saying all this? Well, the journey through the mind of a mischaracterized schizophrenic truly beats the destination. Most content creators, they just don't study the game's review. They read Psychosis on Wikipedia, they slap a diagnosis onto their slop scripts, and they call it a day because, you know, it sounds cool, and things that sound cool, they must be right. Also, writing video games is really hard. Nikita's first game was short, and then it just blew up out of nowhere. When he made a sequel, he had to take it seriously, and that's probably why the canon has holes. It's completely understandable. Depicting mental illness is difficult. If you take too many liberties, you glamorize and misrepresent it, but I think Nikita went the right direction with the second game. Because it's so ambiguous, anyone suffering from any kind of mental illness can relate to the girl, at least in an emotional perspective, not like a literal one. And, well, people like me, we get to sound smart and make cool theories about it. I don't think the girl's pain just comes from being sick. I think it starts with how she thinks, her fears, her habits, the stories that she tells herself. And those thoughts make her feel worse, and that hurt builds up and develops into mental illness. And now, because she's mentally ill, it kind of feeds those dark thoughts again. It's a loop, and each part makes every other symptom worse. And honestly, mental illness or not, I think a lot of us are doing the same thing. Being stuck in that girl's head, sitting in a room beside her, it feels warm, detached, creative, safe. But soon enough, it starts to feel dangerous. The voice she created to help her often bullies her. She's super nice to you, but with strangers, she's an asshole. She's caught in a cognitive bias, the belief that thinking hard enough will solve her problems. This story is a case study in why that belief solves nothing and causes more pain. To simplify the hidden issue that plagues her mind, let's look at our own issues in two ways. Logical problems are pure mechanics. You need milk? Go to the store. Emotional problems are abstract. You feel so unloved you want to die? Tell your therapist? The girl utilizes overthinking, a defense mechanism, and confuses her emotional pain as a logical puzzle. I feel unloved becomes, how do I stop being unlovable? The danger is when she mislabels emotional problems as logical equations. She thinks and thinks and thinks, eventually coming up with an answer, but it's never fulfilling. In this way, she tricks herself. Her overthinking is never about finding an answer. It's an addiction that makes her feel in control. To her, the intellectualization of her problems feels like progress, but it's stagnation in a very insidious way. Unfortunately, that blind spot is what keeps her trapped in this cycle, and that's why she never finds the answer. This isn't a game about finding the answer. It's a sad story about a girl who has all the keys to helping herself, to breaking free, but has tricked herself into experiencing the same recurring sense of dread. One of the game's core narrative techniques is the concept of looping. The girl says something, then she repeats it again and again and again. This may seem schizo-pilled, sure, but you do it, I do it. Our brains actually love this stuff. Echolalia, the act of repeating what someone else says, is one of the first ways children start to speak. This is why institutional education systems utilize repetition across mnemonic frameworks, operant conditioning structures, and recursive information cycling. Pedagogical repetition isn't incidental. It's a deliberate mechanism where repeated exposure increases the efficacy of glutamatergic transmissions and synapses within the hippocampal formation, encoding short-term patterns into durable retrievable memory traces. That said, most adults would find this shit cringe. This is so stupid. We're above simple rhymes, we think, but it's not true. Adults continue to loop, just in more sophisticated ways.
This motherfucker takes naps. I don't trust people to take. I can't fuck with a nap. I can't.
We rewatch shows, rehearse conversations,
I don't take naps.
replay moments in our head. It's all the same shit. Looping helps us learn, helps us feel safe, helps us make sense of our reality. Have you ever met someone that brings up the same conversation topic frequently?
I did DMT 3 times in a day. The DMT experiences, the regular DMT trips I've had,
Have you ever noticed that our daily routines are just loops that we constantly manage? Whether you're a gym rat, a college student, or even a doctor, cycling the same medical cases day in and day out.
Lupus. Again.
Lupus could cause lupus. Yeah, tough to find a 6-year-old who doesn't have lupus.
The context and how things play out may be, slightly different. Life is a loop within itself. YouTubers, we're all trapped in this content loop, listening to the same dogshit advice, optimizing our thumbnails and titles. Fun fact, this is live footage of me the last time you didn't click on my video.
Snake, what's wrong? Answer me, please! Snake?
Human behavior is recursive, ritualistic, habitual, and understanding this concept recontextualizes everything. The girl isn't broken for repeating herself. We're all repetitive, even those labeled as different. In psychiatry, echolalia shows up in diagnoses like autism or Tourette's. So when you zoom out, it becomes clear. Repetition is human. Repetition works because it's predictable, and predictability gives your brain a break. This is why repeating phrases internally or out loud can have therapeutic effects. For the girl, repeating herself is a coping mechanism for trauma. In one scene, when the player selects a specific dialogue box, an image of her being choked by her father flashes the screen. Immediately, she begins to spiral. I wonder if I tear out all my eyelashes one after another, will my eyes stop itching? I wonder if I tear out all my eyelashes one after another, all my eyelashes one after another. What she's doing isn't socially acceptable, but it's relatable. And that's why people connect with her, even if they can't articulate why. But now we're all educated. This behavior isn't unhinged. It's thought loops, behavior loops, it's repetition. It's bloody human, mate. What the fuck? The main gameplay takes place in a room. She imagines her thoughts as fireflies on the ceiling. They scatter, and you're told to collect them by inspecting items marked in red. Some contain fireflies, others don't. Every click triggers commentary, and she never stays on topic. There is no plot. I mean, there is, but not really. It's just a bunch of narrative devices that teach you who she is as a person, rather than this, like, coherent story. First off, the girl is an unreliable narrator. Click on her school bag, and she says she loved school. Ask her why she dropped out, and apparently her dad picked her up one day, said she was too old for the curriculum. They went home, mom greeted them, the family had dinner, and her academic life ended. Just like that. Smooth, simple, mwah. Ask again, and the story falls apart. Now she's clawing and screaming as her dad drags her out of the school. Her classmates watch, but they're kind of used to it. He forces her into the car the entire ride home. They say nothing, and her mom never showed. In fact, she's gone. Again. Now, the girl isn't lying. She reports what she wishes were true before she can face what actually happened. And that's the genius of the game. It doesn't give you direct exposition. By making the character nonsensical in this really human way, the player learns about the main character, but indirectly, like through her avoidance of trauma. Earlier, when she says that she loved school because of the fluorescent lights, it sounds weird, but, you know, believable. But given that she's someone who loves to sleep, hates to go outside, and lives isolated in the dark, these white lights naturally build this skepticism towards her. But she's never unlikable. Rather, she feels like that friend who's really fun to be around, but you kind of have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. She's eccentric that way. There's a funny moment where she builds an elaborate metaphor involving a hamster escaping its cage and being brought to the store, saying all this to make a point, except she spends so much time building the details of the analogy that she loses her train of thought. She repeats herself often. We've talked about why, but people misread this. They think she's suffering from psychosis, but I think she's dodging us on purpose. Click on her notebook and she says that she doesn't draw that often because if she did, she'd have to buy a new one. That means going outside, taking the subway, and that's tedious. But this interaction is not that. It's her rationalizing her fear of public spaces as being just too lazy to use public transportation. If the player suggests that she asks her mother to buy a new notebook for her, she immediately deflects. Buy what? Ask whom? Can you even form coherent sentences? She doesn't want to admit her discomfort, so she picks a fight with you. If you push on this again, she breaks the task down into mechanics. So you want me to perform a string of actions, blah blah blah, it's all fucking bullshit. Basically, stripping people and interactions with them down to their core fundamentals is another one of her coping mechanisms, because breaking things down to their bare bones, it severs all their meaning and emotional weight. For example, when you expect her laptop, she recalls how she had over 300 online friends friends in the past. But then she says how these friends aren't really people, just lines of code and numbers. Yes, technically all the experiences we have online are lines of code, but there's a difference in simply recognizing the technicalities of reality and using it to avoid confronting trauma. And we can test this logic right now. If I say something disturbingly racist, something super offensive right now, no I didn't. This video is just code. You're not a viewer. I'm not a creator. It's just a bunch of numbers. YouTube is a simulation made up of ones and zeros. It's just a website. Who gives a fuck? The girl is intelligent and creative, but sometimes she uses it as a weapon to gain control. She keeps every item in the room untouched, even the dead plants, so that she can memorize the space, to make it a visual novel that she's built for you to walk through. And some items are just favored over others. When you inspect a laptop or the bag or the sink, you get emotionally and intellectually charged monologues, but open the compartment and she refuses to explain further. Who knows what I'll imagine? Yeah guys, this girl who is admitting straight up that she is imagining everything the player sees is suffering from psychosis. Thank you, Wikipedia. She is emotionally volatile, an unreliable narrator. Repeating phrases and deflections are defense mechanisms, not exclusively mental illness or some big scary diagnosis, and everything you're seeing is her imagination. But these narrative elements are not utilized to give you a puzzle to decipher, rather a person to experience. When you convince the girl to go outside, she opens up about her online friend, someone she now describes as a program, just lines of code behind a computer screen. He opened up to her at first, which inspired her to share every last detail of her life with him. I don't think she really believes he's a program, but notice the parameters she's placed. When he was kind and emotionally available, she saw him as a person, a friend. But when he betrayed her, she stripped away that humanity and labeled him a robot. Now he's a program that is just functioning as it should to hurt her, right? The ending is unclear. She claims that he sent an army of robots after her, but I think those robots were people. She gave him her secrets, and he turned them into gossip, and everyone else joined in and bullied her. The main gameplay ends with the voice helping her fall asleep, and that's when everything changes. Her dreams are the one part of the story that she cannot control. At this point, the game stops being a contained, self-narrated visual novel and becomes something else entirely, something coherent, abstract, but meaningful. And that shift in structure is exactly where the real analysis begins. The shop ending is a default ending of the game. It's a dream sequence that reveals the most about the girl by showing an intimate example of how she fails to connect with everyone else. Even after the girl falls asleep, the game continues the concept of looping by emulating the first game. Milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk. In the previous title, the player controls a voice for the first time. They meet the girl who plans to buy milk at the local shop. She is anxiously rehearsing her lines for the cashier, takes a deep breath, and continues her 19th attempt, this time with one syllable more. She seems like the type who hasn't left the house in what feels like weeks, and now she's forcing herself to go buy milk. You guide her, at least she asks if you're supposed to help her. On the way to the store, the girl spirals quickly. She practices how to ask for milk, questions whether she's stepping correctly, and counts her movements in reverse, unsure if she's moving forward or backward. It's really nonsensical. She pretends that she's the protagonist of a visual novel just to make the experience feel scripted and manageable. And through this creative perspective, not a literal one, is how you experience the series. At the store, she runs into a hostile customer who fixates on the letter O, visually a void which terrifies her. Then, a cashier demands more money than the milk costs. She gives it, the transaction is slow, humiliating, she kinda gets manipulated, but it's technically successful. On her way home, her thoughts unravel further. Monologues about medication, trauma, and the color red. She opens up about her father's suicide. When she finally returns, her mother asks if she bought the milk. She says, "Yes, Mom." And that's it. That's the ending of the first game. It's about like 20 minutes. Throughout Milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk, the player is given the choice to insult the girl. And if they do so twice, the game abruptly ends. Before closing out, the window cuts to a close-up of her face, where she says that you're not helping at all. Now that we're caught up in the default ending of its sequel, the girl wakes up in a bench in front of a familiar road. In this sequence, she effectively takes the role of the player, so there's no voice this time, it's just her. But she does run into a boy, and they enter an identical dynamic. In this dream, she meets Tresca, who holds this off-putting expression, and despite initial resistance from the girl, he pressures her to help him buy milk at the store, asking if she's supposed to help him. Their interaction is weirdly tense. Despite being this introverted, shy boy who needs her help, whenever she's rude or dismissive, he challenges it or leaves. It almost feels like Tresca is expecting the girl to follow a script. He calls her out for being late. When she appears confused, he takes a deep breath and repeats himself. When she apologizes, treating him nice basically, he continues. This mimics the first game somewhat. Milk Inside technically has choices, but if you're mean, the girl pushes back, and if you're mean again, the game ends. This subtle policing seems out of character for Tresca, even though you just met him. It's almost like this mechanism behind him is prompting him to subtly punish you for failing him. In Milk Inside, the girl who fails to rehearse a simple social interaction also has the strength to apparently place her boundaries nearly immediately with you, despite being a pushover to everyone else in the game. These confrontations with the most introverted people you'll ever meet is a little hard to believe, but that's what makes it surreal. Obviously, the fact that you are a voice, as the girl is to Tresca, could be a major factor in this unorthodox surge of confidence. It's not typical for someone to be scared of a voice that created for fun, but these dual, out-of-character, conflict-avid moments feel strangely alien for these characters. You are obligated to take me to the store. You do understand that refusal is futile. This isn't a boy, this is the game telling the girl that she has to be nice to progress. In Milk Inside, the girl breaks the fourth wall all the time, even directly referencing visual novels, and Tresca does in a more subtle way too. I'm serious. I'm not the one who decided that. He's constantly shifting emotions, the girl thinks, and it's accurate because no one would actually behave this way. There's no consistency. She tells him straight up that she doesn't like him, and after a short back and forth, he takes her hand and they walk to the store before she can reject him again. On the way there, Tresca begins to walk weirdly, mimicking her behavior from the last game, stopping suddenly and studying the ground. He's retracing his steps just as she did, and the girl notes how long the walk is taking because of this. This dynamic between subjugating the player to an overt long walk in the first game and growing quickly impatient when her male doppelganger does it to her, it foreshadows the crux of this dream sequence. By the way, if what I'm saying between the girl, Tresca, the girl as the voice in the dream, and the force behind Tresca seems really recursive and confusing, that's the point. In the first game, the girl breaks the fourth wall, but only in the world that she's created, the visual novel. In this dream, Tresca is breaking the fourth wall of her life, which she, like every human being, is only kind of aware of. And on top of the fact that conversations are about the dream itself and also her life, but takes place within her brain while simultaneously being about it, makes it really hard to decipher for her and us. You are always operating in a way of thinking that has cognitive and emotional blind spots. There is always a set of rules and systems outside of you that influence you, and even when you become aware of those factors, you change as a person, and a new set of systems continue to pull the string. Like the girl, we are always stuck in this recursive psychology that can never be fully solved, only changed. The girl and Tresca hit the store, and she notices that the sign says 20 minutes until closing, roughly the same playtime as the first game. Tresca notes that the store likely has a person shifting the sign every 5 minutes before closing. This sounds bizarre, so the girl disagrees, only for an employee to come and switch the sign to 15 minutes left, further proving that Tresca knows the bounds of the game that they're playing. And that's an important distinction to make. Tresca either exclusively knows the rules of the game and nothing else, or knows everything, but chooses to forget information in order to test the girl. Because once they enter the store, he is completely helpless. When she's in the store with him, he cannot find the milk, which is something she did easily in the first game. When they're lost in the store, Tresca leaves to ask someone for directions. But he wouldn't need to do that if he knew directions. When a commotion starts, the girl finds him staring at a customer, eyes popped and shaking. This plays out similarly in the first game. What's interesting in Tresca's confrontation is the customer says, "No, not again," so there's continuity there. It's kind of cool. The customer asks if he belongs to the girl, and she replies, "Yes, I'm sorry," a quiet reflection to how she answered her mother's question in the first game. When she grabs Tresca and holds him for bothering the customer, this highlights the key point behind the girl's dream, her hypocrisy. Earlier in the game, if the player selects a specific dialogue option, the girl experiences her first death. An image of her father strangling her flashes the screen, indicating his method to dealing with her emotions. At this point, the father is dead, but it's clearly traumatized her and has profoundly affected her self-image and worldview. However, in the store, when Tresca is in emotional distress after a hurtful interaction, she covers Tresca's mouth. She's dismissive. "Can you act normal?" "Tresca, you don't understand." She replies, "Of course I don't. I don't understand anything." She tells him annoying other people is wrong, just like how she blames herself for putting the milk in quote-unquote danger. The girl unnecessarily chooses to shame Tresca for approaching someone instead of supporting him. It's projection. Ultimately, when she meets another person suffering from the same problems that she does, she sustains the damage. She doesn't help them. And this is the core question of this dream. Should we always feel sympathetic for the mentally ill? I'm going to get into some pretty controversial territory here, so look out if you're sensitive to this material. The crux of the dream is that ideally, we should sympathize for the mentally ill, but it's also important to recognize when they are the ones sustaining unhealthy recursions within themselves and others. And the girl now has failed to be the person that she needed in the first title in her own fucking dream, which takes place canonically the same night of the first game. When the role of supported shifts to caretaker, the girl behaves more like her parents, and this is an important aspect that goes against the social narrative of the mentally ill. When the roles are reversed, they may cause the same pain in others that they suffer from themselves. Earlier, a rude customer is pretty dismissive towards Tresca, and the girl submits to this stranger's authority, but in private, she ridicules the boy for bothering them, not the other way around. She doesn't support him. She lets people push her, but then continues to push away the one person who claims to like her. She tells him directly that she doesn't like him. She doesn't share her name, and yet, when asked publicly if Tresca is hers, she says yes. Now, is this response out of a social obligation, or some subconscious need to have access to people like Tresca and to keep them at arm's length? Towards the end of the dream, Tresca begins to smile. He smiled once before when the girl later escalated a confrontation with the cashier. Once they leave the store, he tries to connect with her, asking if she likes ice cream. She replies coldly, "No." And once he cracks that smile, Tresca returns back to the omniscient force that judges her actions. And this entire dream teaches us an important lesson of these interactions. There's different kinds of shyness, selfish and endearing. For most of the game, you get the shy version of the girl that is likable. She does connect with the player character, sharing fears, anxieties, and even more intimate, intangible stuff like visions of her trauma that likely affected her. Random monologues that are funny but nonsensical in a very human way. Creativity you'd find nowhere else but in the safeness of her bedroom and her mind. This is not what Tresca experienced. He experienced the selfish aspect of shyness, where honesty is replaced with defensiveness, where craved connection is alleviated with pushing people away, where time spent acting is replaced with isolated thinking. Interactions are half-assed, anxiety is projected, and signals are mixed. People who constantly defend, deflect, and withhold in the name of trauma aren't always victims. They can become exhausting, contradictory, and at times cruel. This obsession with control masks the shyness straight up sucks to interact with. And the people like Tresca, who respond by leaving you, are entirely justified in doing so. And the sad part is, it breaks her. She doesn't want to be alone, that's why she created you. She fears her own mother because she never feels understood in her own home. The crude employees of the shop are unwillingly given a pass because these interactions are scary for her. Even getting close to someone like Tresca, people who initially like her, even at this stage, it's too hard for her. It still feels like utter heartbreak when they finally conclude that you aren't helping. The phone ending is one of the most subtly profound conclusions of the game, and it also pretty much confirms my recursive psychology theory. The girl texts the number of a pizzeria, and the automatic text response replies and deals and confirming orders. The girl's inner monologue spews onto the text, and it's a bit hard to follow, but then you read lines like this: "I can just keep on thinking, and even then, my thoughts are meaningless and empty as everyone else." The more the girl is in control of her thoughts, the more we get to see the warped worldview, and the less control she's in, the more normal the world seems. Even in the previous dream sequence, the girl is still in her mind, so it's colored dark red and eerie, but the people appear normal. The worm man is now human, the cashier isn't an alien but a woman who's lost her patience, the art style has changed back to the first game, and even the voices have changed as well. The phone ending continues to build this concept. The color scheme has transformed to mundanity. It looks like a regular afternoon. The girl is so glued to her phone and distracted that we get to see an authentic vision of her day that she experiences. She has little control. She's navigating a boring modern world, and the fact that she's glued to her phone and trapped within her thoughts, debating whether she feels anything or is aware of her existence, that's what she genuinely endures. Not the monsters, not the shadows, not the mother. And for a lot of overthinkers, this is the reality they live in outside their head. Internally, it's likely creative, nonsensical, and sometimes just hell on earth. But to the outsider, you are a timid girl who's a bit distant in front of the counter. It's honestly underwhelming conceptually, at least on the surface, and I can see why others would like to make this game more than what it is. Hell, even the main character does it. But the outside realities of these situations are, no one can tell about your inner pain, and remaining closed off like this, it doesn't communicate that you're hurting or spiraling. You just seem slightly distracted, or mean, or worried. And even an ending as subtle as this one can unmask a really subtle challenge to the current perception of helping the mentally ill. Should we validate this behavior entirely? We always hear tragedies of the folks who failed to save their friends after they committed suicide, and the common consensus is to look for signs. But what do you do when these signals are abstract and elusive? What can you do when approaching these people may result in unhealthy and toxic dynamics? When the issues of the mentally ill are intangible and internal, how can you practically help them? By being nice to them when they're dismissive? Validate all their experiences when they're consistently uncommunicative and detached? What is the perfect formula for being sympathetic to their pain, yet still holding them accountable for their actions? It's a near impossible question to answer. Not a lot of people want to not help those in need, and yet validating them constantly will end up hurting you. The most effective responses currently has been to help them, but guide them towards solving that internal crisis themselves. Assist them in introspectively finding an answer within themselves that motivates them to stay longer. My personal method of helping others is through education. Through the video essay medium, there's something personal and recursive about an educational video. I'm not your friend. I can't harm you, and I really can't help you. And you can rewatch and hear me share the same words and ideas over and over and over again. But if you connect with the information I'm showing you, you can save yourself through my work. Part of it is me, but a lot of it is you. You chose to click on this video, to watch it to the end, and you learned about the mechanisms of overthinking. And as someone who shared similar problems with the girl, and possibly even you, that's a profound choice that we never give ourselves credit for. I wish I could write more about this ending, but part of its charm is that it's subtly profound. It's genuine dialogue, no surreal dream experiences, it's not an internal journey into the subconscious, no dramatic expressions of death or abstract messaging about control. It's just multiple boring scenes taking place in the most contemporary and dull day in Russia. But through analyzing how it's interconnected with the story and learning even more about the girl through what she's continuing to share, you can learn some pretty deep lessons here, and connecting with not only people like me, but also the creator of the game himself, who inspired all this through lived experiences. And that, to me, and hopefully to you, is really helpful. The mirror ending is a literal loop itself. In this ending, the same scene plays over and over again. She stands in front of a mirror, expresses disappointment in how her face looks, and cheers herself back up before her mother calls her to go to school, which she replies, "Yes, Mom." Then, the interaction repeats itself, word for word, with almost identical imagery. the only difference being how the girl views herself. This ending's analysis will be short as it's a repeat of the same scene, but its importance is in offering additional evidence to its core themes and thus reconfirming the recursion theory. The color scheme is normal again, which correctly implies she doesn't have a lot of control here. There's external factors that she cannot change that are influencing her. She has to get ready for school. She's required to go there. She's being rushed by her mother to hurry up. The only aspect she has control over is how she views herself. And of course, her perception of herself changes vividly. My favorite detail is that she herself doesn't change, only the mirror does. This ending is unsettling. The looping makes the dialogue melt into itself, and the imagery and music become more and more bizarre and eerie. But just how these images are contained in the mirror, the images we see the entire game, only works in the confines of her mind. It's not psychosis. She isn't literally hallucinating or delusional, but she is hurting and continues to express that in a really creative and haunting way. The room in the field ending marks the start of the girl's subconscious exploration. It takes place in an enclosed room that feels like a casket, but also, somehow, isn't. The space itself expands only when she interacts with it. When she reaches for the ceiling, it lifts. When she runs towards the walls, they stretch away. There's no shape until she moves. The only fixed object is a door. In its center, a glowing blue eye shaped like the letter O. A void. Behind the door, she hears inhuman sounds, unpredictable in tone and timing. She avoids it at first, but eventually, she feels drawn to confront it. The door, in turn, moves away. She tries to reach it, jumping at it like an animal. She becomes desperate, screaming, no response. Then a voice finally answers. It says it can hear her. It's looking for her. She keeps running towards the door, stretching her arm as far as she can, leaving a trail of blood behind, but her calls go unanswered, until eventually, the voice sees her. But still, she can't reach the door. She keeps running for what feels like hours. The voice speaks gently, trying to connect, asking her how she feels. She gets angry, furious, makes one final leap, and the ground disappears. She falls. She wakes up in a field. The air is wet. The ground smells like earth and water. It's night, but the moon hangs pale in the distance. Everything is still. Then she hears it. But it doesn't sound like an animal. It sounds like a person. She stands up, the sound repeats. It's the same voice she heard behind the door, but now it's coming from somewhere across the field. She follows it. As she walks, she hears a familiar dialogue. Her own words, echoing back to her. The same one spoken earlier across the door. And then she sees it. A silhouette. Distant, still, barely formed. Clearly a vision of herself, the one trapped in the room. She doesn't recognize that it's her, but we do. The entire sequence folds in on itself. The room, the voice, the girl in the void. She wasn't just one of them, she was all of them. The room was her internal state, a space where answers felt close but were always out of reach. She thought it was a casket initially, but it wasn't. It was just a space with no dimension, a void. No fixed boundaries. She yelled until her ears rang, but to the outside world, it was barely a whisper, a wheeze. It represents the kind of suffering you can't prove. From inside, she's screaming. From outside, she looks like nothing's wrong. Even the letter O, the void she fears, is the only thing she consistently repeats. The girl tries to reach out to the silhouette, asking it how it feels if it's hurt, but there's no reply, just muffled sounds. The figure doesn't meet her halfway. This is what it's like trying to help someone in this type of crisis. Even when they want help, they don't always help you help them. Even when they're suffering, it doesn't always show. The girl begins to rationalize the silence. Maybe that figure isn't a person. Maybe it's the wind going mad and the black spot is a stone or a tree. Maybe she's just tired and in a bad mood. Maybe she's stuck on her phone and distracted. Maybe she's just reserved and shy. The other person cannot understand your pain because there are no signs of it even existing. She thinks about turning back. There's nothing to grasp onto, no clear signs, no emotional signals. But when she turns back around, the silhouette is still there. Same distance, unchanged. She begins to feel like it's chasing her, so she runs. She hears the chanting again. She falls, turns to look, but again, despite the distance that she's taken, the silhouette hasn't moved. Its size hasn't changed. The distance remains the same. Her fear tells her something is approaching. Her eyes tell her nothing's changed at all. Eventually, the silhouette does move. It walks towards her slowly, still repeating the same sound. And then something unseen grabs her head. It turns it with a crunch and her vision goes dark. She wakes up in a room, back where it all started. Bare walls, and the cycle resets. This dream represents how mental illness is perceived, internally, externally, and existentially. Inside the room, from her perspective, she's sprinting towards recovery, trying everything, clawing at the walls, screaming at the doors. From the outside, she's quiet, passive, still. That's the horror of silent suffering. It demands so much internally, while appearing like nothing at all externally. The silhouette is her too. It's part of her that feels unreachable, even to herself. She talks to it, begs it to speak, but it gives nothing back. That's what depression does. It hides in plain sight, even from the person feeling it. She wakes up, the cycle begins again. And with it, a feeling she knows all too well. The final dream sequence, the stairs ending, is a literal visual metaphor for everything the girl has been spiraling through. The setting is a spiral staircase, one among an infinite number, stretching endlessly in every direction, with no destination. The staircase itself makes no sense. It's endless, so going anywhere is pointless. Going up is meaningless. Going down, it's meaningless. Jumping off, meaningless. All of it is meaningless. Then, the super creature appears. It's a shape and a presence, but it's also nothing. The girl realizes she isn't fully in control of her body. She can choose which direction to go, up, down, or to the side, but while these choices feel autonomous, she knows that exercising that free will is an illusion. As the super creature begins to speak, the girl's thoughts begin to fade. It takes priority over her rational mind. The super creature doesn't attack her, it talks. Its voice is calm, commanding. It asks her questions that she can't answer. Questions about how she exists, how she feels, how she survives. But it's not actually listening for answers. It's there to make her realize the truth. She is not in charge of her life, and she never was. As she begins to descend the stairs, it says, "Try creating imagery that would instill the feeling that everything is as it should be, and with time, it will create a new order inside you." Some of these words are hard to decipher, but that last line is exactly what she's been doing the whole game. I think the super creature is her subconscious. It isn't confident, it's not insecure, because it doesn't feel. It's absolute. It knows how her mind works. It doesn't care about her comfort. It only cares about survival. And if that means trapping her in a narrative where she's broken, unloved, and monstrous, then that's exactly what it will do. Because those stories give her control, even if they hurt others. And creating imagery in her mind in order to feel in control, that's how she survived. But knowing that truth, it doesn't help her. It only reminds her that there's no escape. There's no meaning. She isn't sad. I mean, she feels sad. But in reality, she's powerful, intimidating, mysterious, hurtful, selfish. Maybe knowing yourself fully isn't the goal. Maybe knowing yourself is the scariest, most painful thing you can experience.